Well, thank you very much. I wrote a brief summary. I just want to read parts of it which I shared with all our board directors. See, as we emerge from this perfect storm and pick up pieces and move forward, we have to acknowledge that terrible things have happened. And there are cascading consequences of policy decisions ahead of us. Some of them are very sad that we have to face this. For example, threats to our school safety. And on 2 occasions, for example, we had to call the FBI to help us. It breaks my heart when one of our 16-year-old students, instead of being in school, was shooting and was unfortunately died at the hand of police because he shot at the police. And the safety challenges faced by our staff at Waldo, challenges with behavior and risk the way I see it, has outstripped our capacities, and gaps in our threat assessment. Staff injury, we have heard from the vice president of the teachers union saying that staff are also afraid of reporting. I'm not here to say second guess, or not here to say we should have done this. History, we all know what happened. Just like Director Hines said, the times were such, it was a perfect storm, and everybody was caught up in that storm. That's how I see. As a board, we cautioned not to make some big decisions in the middle of a perfect storm of many, many factors, which really harmed everybody, affected everybody. And the times were such, people were suspicious of each other, people were angry, people were scared, and all kinds of emotion was going. So I went back and looked at the civil rights data collection report all the way from 2008 or so. I went and looked at the Oregon Department of Education. And at that time I saw, there were, of course, we have some SROs. And it was not entirely clear to me where the children were getting arrested, whether they're getting arrested in the community or in the school. And at that point in time, it was all showing 0-0 to all the school-related law enforcement referrals and arrest. It didn't make sense to me because the children were telling us that they were getting into trouble with the law. And I kept asking, is it happening inside the school or is it happening in the community? Because that's a really important ratio to consider. Is it school-related arrest or is it a community-related arrest? Sometimes the problem could be happening in the community, but they come to school. Some of them are by federal law mandatory arrests. There is no ifs and buts about it. It has nothing to do with school policy. But the narrative and the emotions were such, there was no room for any discussion. So at that point in time, we got a report from the Marion County DA's office. And I'm just going to read this thing. Less than 0.5% of students in Marion County are arrested by SROs. Less than 0.5%. Removing SRO does not remove police from school. Law enforcement and DHS remain obligated to coordinate and co-investigate child abuse cases, most of which occur at school, aren't sent so that the kids are not sent home to the perpetrator. And as predicted, instead of SROs, the patrol officers will have to respond, some of whom are brand new, responsible for emergency response elsewhere, unable to adequately investigate such cases. And so in this process, Superintendent Perry, and rest of our board spent hundreds of hours behind the scene, going through the data, trying to understand what is going on. We had multiple meetings, I must say. Anybody wants, they can request. I got hundreds of documents. So we spent lots of hours trying to figure out where is discipline, what is happening, at what point in time the law enforcement have to get involved. Is it the problem at a discipline end, or is it at the problem at the SRO end? Because there are at least 5 different steps that are involved from the time a child is identified to have a difficulty till the point of time the juvenile justice system adjudication happens. There is also a Salem threat assessment document. It's a very good book that I read almost like 2 or 3 times. So there's a step 1 and a step 2. There's ways in which the systems are put in place. And there was a newspaper article for a good, the Statesman Journal wrote a very good article, I must say, for a change, they wrote a very detailed article which really says that SRO should never have been involved in discipline process. So then I started asking, so what is going on here? Because every time the whole narrative was, obviously the national tragedy got brought into our community, and the entire focus was on those 13 officers when there was no data to support it. And then we go back and look at the data. Of course, there is disproportionality of discipline, expulsion, suspension, and that problem has not been solved at all. It's still happening. There is 2:1 ratio of children from Hispanic or Latino community, expulsion, suspensions, and of course there is a 55% increase in the risk of disciplinary problem. Most of it is fighting and aggression and violence. So the question I really, then we went and asked, I got a report from the Keizer police, because it really, I wanted to have more than one way to know what is going on. Because of civil rights data collection, that's when we discovered we were not even measuring the law enforcement referrals. So that leaves it open. So we tried to go back and take a look at our data and see what is being reported, what is not being reported. Then we got an independent report from the Keizer police. Even that shows that most of the report talks about the positive role the SRO plays. So the child learns to trust the officer. Because these children have to eventually become an adult. If there is a domestic violence or a crime happening in their home, they have to learn to have trusting relationship. They cannot take law into their own hands. So this is how we were. At that point in time, there was also an atmosphere of entire fear in our community. People were scared to say what they had in mind. Of course, there were some group of public comments where they are also coming from the position of fear, saying that we are scared of the police, we don't want them. But we were not able to articulate to the community the real problem has been in the way our discipline policies are being implemented. So we went along with that narrative to relieve the pressure in that moment. The decision was made to remove the SRO or not to renew the contract. In that moment, it did serve a purpose to diffuse the situation. Unfortunately, on a long run, it was not a sustainable solution in my mind, because the children have to learn to understand the consequences of their actions, or learning to know what is within the law, what is not okay, how to have a trusting relationship with our agencies or institutions. Unfortunately, in that area, we started failing. So during the distant learning, it was thought that we didn't want SRO. But on the other hand, that was the time the reporting of child abuse went down, but that didn't mean the children were safe, because only a sworn officer has the ability to span through multiple systems and trying to find out if there is an online predator trying to harm our child or not. Because no psychiatrist or social worker has the ability to go through that. And as we know, in 2 cases, we had to call the FBI to help us. So we did discuss these things behind the scene with our district leadership and with multiple meetings saying, children are going to come back after the pandemic. They're going to be much more traumatized. Is this the prudent decision to make? After a lot of discussion, it was, there were certain groups, as Director Hines suggested, and NAACP headed by Dr. Richardson. He also was, of the opinion that children were scared of SROs and this is not the thing. But it was impossible for us to articulate this point in the community. And we really felt this was not the right way to go, not to make such precipitous decision with disastrous consequences that we are unfortunately facing at this point in time, because these officers, when we end up calling, don't have a relationship with our children, and they have to come in from the community as predicted by the DA of our county. So this was the background in which we felt. Then the question was, is it an operational decision or is it a board decision? So then we got clarity on that. It was an operational decision by the superintendent to make this decision. But ultimately, board is responsible for the safety. So by an executive limitation, we said, okay, this is an operational decision, but every month you show us an outcome to say how our children are going to be safe. Of course, month by month, that's how we started sharing this data in public.
Director
Then, of course,
Spindagari.
I'm just going to finish this, please.
Thank you.
Then it led to a situation, the data stopped, And in the last 2-3 months, the data is being presented, but we never had a discussion on the data. We saw the data, the numbers were going up, 55% increase in disciplinary problems, and yet nothing has changed. We haven't achieved anything. Number two, in the last 2-3 months, the way the data is presented, it has become even more convoluted. Before it was month to month, so people could see a trend.
Dr. Chandragiri, I think we need to wrap this piece up, and it's a perfect segue because I believe that we're going to hear about how we will have more discussion about that data.
So let me just wrap it up in 30 seconds, if it may be.
Yes, because I would like to comment.
Yes, please. Let me finish in 30 seconds. So what I would really like to say is, when we start moving forward, what do? Putting pieces together cannot include set of false choices, this or that were offered in the midst of a perfect storm. There is really an urgent need for course correction. Let's get an independently verified forensic audit of all that happened. Let's really try an authentic, confidential survey of all families of our students, all families, for this. And then we can have data and this audit to guide us what kind of policy changes we need to change. Because we have heard clearly the policy hasn't changed. So the teachers' union shared with us.
Director Chandragiri, I'm going to cut you off.
Director Chandragiri, you mentioned very clearly that there's been lots of reports in the paper, and I think one of those came from you, and you said it multiple times tonight, the complete disregard of our safety systems and our threat assessment system. So your opinion, and I know you're running for office, so I understand the need to create energy around a campaign, but sorry, I'm bothered by this on behalf of our staff, because the people that you recognized last month, the people that stood back there, and the people that you walked up to and said to Courtney McCarthy, wow, the safety, the threat assessment, you have a model system, those things, in making those comments, the people that show up every day for the safety of our kids were totally dehumanized. And I got a chance to sit with our police chief this last week and talk about prevention. And isn't it exciting? We have a police chief talking about prevention. And we were talking about our system and that we were stronger than ever as a preventative system. Was a totally different narrative from people who understand safety. Now, we can always do better, but I just want to say, and I called Courtney after that, because the amount that Courtney takes and the amount that Chris and his team take every day, they're showing up in such incredible ways. They're cultural navigators out in our community. They're talking about gang violence like nobody else in the community is talking about. They're setting up volunteer programs in our schools so kids can see people that look like them, that are models. And each thing they do, we have people that want to dehumanize their work, and it's just not very cool. So sorry if I'm emotional about it, but I just want you to know the impact on the people who show up every day to have safety in our schools. So when I was talking to Courtney about our threat assessment system, the thing she reminded me of is that our threat assessment never starts with the police. Never. It starts with us, because we are the keepers of the preventative system. We know the kids, we know the challenges, we know the threats they're posing. Now, we engage law enforcement. And our police chief would say, of the city of Salem, would say, is stronger than ever. So on that, I would like you to do a fast run through for our safety system so we can all be reminded of the good work we do and be a little reassured when people make stuff up that isn't true about us.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Odo Sinata. Thank you, Chair. Superintendent Perry, I really appreciate the staff from our safety, security, and threat assessment team. I have extreme respect for them. There is no question about that. but throughout my 4 years, I have focused on safety of our student. It is not something just because I decided to put my name in the hat to run again for the elections. So I just want to go on the record to say I have consistently maintained safety even before I became a safe school board director. So I just want to make sure that's on the record. When I ask this question, it is not anything to do with the staff or anybody. It is with the true interest of making sure each and every child, every staff, every community member is safe. I do not want this to be at a personal level. It is all about how we can work on looking at the systems. So sometimes part of that is we have to raise this question. We need to shine light on them. And that's the only way we will regain trust and credibility. And the community is feeling scared. When they come to me, I have to reassure them. So we really need this kind of dialogue and a transparency so that the community feels assured that our systems are working. It is only with that intention I ask these questions. And I've consistently insisted and focused on advocating for our children's safety. Right from the first day I came, even before I started this role. So I just want to go on the record and make sure I clarify my position. It has nothing to do with my re-election. It is always to do with, I truly believe in our children should be safe. Without safety, there is no learning. And our teachers have to feel safe so that they can do their work. And that is how I really want to make sure I clarify, because there seems to be some misunderstanding or misinformation about when I advocate for safety. I've consistently maintained this. I have written about it publicly in op-eds, in different media. So it is not anything new that I'm sharing. So I really want to make sure I clarify that in public. I don't want anybody in this board or the community to be misinformed or or my position to be misrepresented. So please allow me. Thank you for allowing me to clarify that.
Thank you for that, Director Chandragiri. I think that the problem, we as board members absolutely should be asking the tough questions.
Absolutely.
Like, I agree that we have to continuously raise these issues around safety and ask all of the questions. But when you make definitive statements in public that are stated as fact related to our district and the employees and students, that's where I think the harm occurs. So I would just request that we're careful about raising the issues and being passionate about the issues, but we refrain from saying things like, we don't have the ability to look at child abuse across the system, when we absolutely do have that ability.
Chair, I quoted from the letter that was sent by the Marion County DA. It's not my statement. I read from the letter that was sent by the district attorney of Marion County. I highlighted and brought it for today's meeting. So I'm really quoting what has already been stated in the public record. And this particular letter, I can submit it again. It was presented in the board. It was shared in the board. So it's a matter of public record that I'm quoting.
Let me reframe and direct my question to the superintendent. Are we able to work across systems when there is a child abuse allegation?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, Director Avila.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm appalled by your statements as well, Director Chandragiri. And I think as you had stated that when the district put out the every day, all day to try to stop and help prevent students from being absent, you said that all these signs went out everywhere and you didn't even know if it worked. And that was very appalling to all the hard work that the district put into it, the communications, the marketing, and the efforts that they were doing.